Coming up, I got a special guest host. April Wright joins us, and she's going to be in the studio. And we're going to talk to Scott King about how you can better integrate security into your organization. Right? It's not just getting out of the silo, but it's going to be some tips and strategies on how you can actually do better. And then instead of discussing articles, we actually convinced Scott to stick around. He's got a fantastic background, and we have a lot of questions for Scott. So you're going to love this because it's all focused on how you can be more effective at your job. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Brought to you by today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/BSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Are you getting pressure to improve your data security? Would you like a faster, easier, better way to patch? Then you need to check out Automox. Automox is a cloud-native platform that patches and manages every endpoint, even remote servers and devices, including Windows, Mac, Linux, and third-party software from a single dashboard. Improve your cyber hygiene, reduce your attack surface, and save 90% of the effort you spend patching. Automox, your patching system of record. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending your assets? Have you penetration tested your public assets? Start 2018 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting at blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night.
Hey, everybody, and welcome. It's Business Security Weekly, and we made it to episode 100. We're recording this on Monday, September 24th, 2018. And I'm still Michael Santarcangelo, your straight-talking guide to elevated performance, accelerated results. And joining me today in studio is April Wright. And she's a bit of an internet legend, and you can Google it. It's true, and it's on the internet, so it absolutely has to be true. And you can also learn more about her if you check out episode 32, just last week, of Application Security Weekly. So, April, should we ask you about the shoes that you got on today, or did you just come into like a pair of Chucks?
It's not about the shoes today. It's all about the socks. I've got panda socks.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's a lockdown. Well, so glad you could join us, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Michael. It's awesome to be back.
Yeah, right. It feels like home now all of a sudden. Cool. So we got Scott King joining us, and before we bring him on, let me just tell you real quick, and I mentioned this last week as well, and I'm excited about this. DerbyCon is holding the first ever mental health and wellness workshop. And if you want to be part of that, you want to support those efforts, go to derbycon.com/wellness. This is it's exciting on a lot of levels. But so let's get into it. So what we're going to talk about here, and the way that we set this up with Scott, and he's very generous to give us a little extra time. So Scott is a former CISO. He's now part of Rapid7. Rapid7's a good partner to the program. And Scott's going to come on and he's going to talk about how to better integrate security into operations and security into the whole organization. And as we got talking about stuff, April and I started peppering with more questions. And finally said, you know what, why don't we just keep you around? So we're going to get a double shot with Scott today. And we're going to start by talking about how to better integrate security in the organization. And then as we keep going, we're going to get a little bit more pointed through all of it. Goal the whole time, of course, is to make sure that you're more effective at the things that you're trying to do in your practice today. And I could read you Scott's impressive bio, but basically he's been doing this for 20 or so years. He's got a fantastic depth of experience around the place, rose up through the ranks to become a CISO, and recently joined Rapid7. So Scott, welcome to Business Security Weekly, and thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Never done something like this before, so this is pretty fantastic. I appreciate you letting me be here today.
No, it's great, and I can tell you from an audience perspective, it's a real treat to get people who are practitioners, because it means you know what our folks are going through, and now you're in a position to look at it in a different way. And if you don't mind, I'd kind of love to start with, what's it like now that you've crossed over to the other side of the table? How are you enjoying the experience, and what led you to that experience?
Yeah, sure. That's actually a really good question. From the practitioner perspective, you get deep into the weeds and you continue pushing the ball forward and doing everything that you possibly can to help further the mission and objective within your organization. And, you get an organization to a point, and honestly, that's probably as far as you're going to be able to take it. And fresh ideas and new leadership, always are a good thing coming into an organization. So part of my decision process to come in Rapid7 is I just wanted to get more exposure. I wanted to talk to more organizations and more leaders across the country, because security is a team sport. I mean, we really have, as a community, a lot of very, very sharp, bright people. And I wanted to continue pushing that message forward and work with some more of those folks. What's been really interesting for me being at Rapid7 for the last 14 months is I probably talked to about over 200 different organizations across the country, even some overseas, different security leaders, different IT leaders, different business leaders for that matter, that are all struggling with the same types of challenges when it comes to understanding the cybersecurity risk in the organization. So, there's probably more I can go into on that, but I think that's probably it in a nutshell.
No, that was well done. I actually felt like a perfect setup. So what we're going to talk about today is looking at, what Rapid7 would call SecOps, and what we might say, if we move away from some of the wording on it, it's really, how do I integrate security better into my organization? Where do you start?
Well, the age-old problem is just about silos, right? I can't even count on single digits. I wish I could. The number of people that I've talked to in organizations that I've personally worked in where information security is a silo, IT is a silo. You have your server administrators, network engineers, network administrators, application developers, and everybody kind of works as they need to with each other, but they don't integrate functions and they don't actually understand what it's like to stand in somebody else's shoes. So the very first thing that I have found to be absolutely effective is breaking down silos by getting to know people better. It seems so basic. It seems so simple to do, but it's one of the hardest challenges, is just building relationships with people in the workplace, professional relationships that can be positive and can allow you to understand what somebody else is struggling with, and for them to understand what you're struggling with. And when you start to identify those shared challenges and those shared goals that you all have, that people relationship really helps you further what you're trying to achieve. So that's the first place I'd start.
What I like about that, and I know April's got a lot of experience here too, is you talked about building relationships with people. You didn't tell me first departments or anything else. You talked about making time for people. I know a lot of the leaders that I work with, they love that concept, but they're busy. Like they're trying to fit 10 pounds of potatoes into a 5-pound sack. How do they get started? I like thinking about just building those relationships, but what's the approach for them to reach out? How do they get that first meeting? How do they get to start that process of realizing that they're also working with people who are also busy? And we have this need, right? I call it influence without authority. We need to influence stuff heading in a direction. In order to do that, we need those relationships. How do you recommend people get started, or what do you see that's been effective for someone who needs to break that ice and get that first meeting started?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about this from my vantage point, and I can also talk about this from other leaders that I've spoken with. But, the bottom line is that it just really comes down to identifying an opportunity to have a discussion, whether it's about a project, whether it's about an initiative, whether it's about an outage that took place, whether it's about some type of litigation that's happening within the organization, just really finding an avenue to reach out and have a conversation with somebody about something that's important to them. So when you're establishing these relationships with folks inside your companies, it's not about what's important to you. What's important to you should be a byproduct of relating to and having a discussion with and building a relationship with somebody else. And in order to really effectively do that, you have to be interested, not just pretend interested, not just fictitiously interested, but legitimately interested in what that person does and what their struggles are. So for example, if you're going and you're interacting with somebody in a legal capacity, whether it's employment law or dealing with litigation, or if it's your general counsel who kind of oversees all of the law, it's what are their biggest challenges? What kind of things do they deal with on a daily basis, and where do you plug into it? And really helping them see the role that you can play in that conversation. They start to understand how they can leverage you and that you're willing to be an open business partner with them.
I think that all starts with what I like to call authentic empathy. So you go into it and you have to understand them and what, like you said, what their challenges are, and then find common ground, right? I 100% agree.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the hardest piece, right? Because what is your common ground with somebody in human resources, or what is your common ground with somebody in supply management, or customer service, or communications, or media affairs? How do you find common ground with your chief operations officer? There's a lot of different techniques and things that I've kind of tried and haven't worked, and things that I've tried and have worked. But like one of the tricks that I've experienced in interfacing with high-level executives within an organization is to make cybersecurity real for them, to talk to them about some type of malware or some type of phishing email that they got. Because a lot of times people get these emails and they just kind of joke it off. Well, maybe you can engage in a dialogue with them and just say, hey, did you get that email, or what did you think about that? Or how did you figure out that was fictitious? How did you figure out that was not real? Because they have their ability. They have a way of doing these things that you can leverage. And then you can further that conversation in a meaningful way to talk about what the threat actors were motivated in, why they might have reached out to that person. And you can make it real for them. And then you can further go and talk about how this could impact them at home, right? How that crossover can take place between the home and the work systems and email and everything else.
Do you think that role-based training helps with that as well?
I think it definitely can. There's like a common bar that you have to set within an organization to bring everybody up to a certain level. And beyond that, I think that's where role-based training absolutely kicks in. So your job as a system administrator is going to be a little bit different than your job as a network administrator, and it's going to be probably a lot different than your job as the CEO. So having that type of role-based training, that role-based awareness, and really focusing in on those different job functions, I think does help make this more real. But also when you're doing that, part of that training is, it's almost like it's senior leadership telling those functions, well, maybe not the CEO, because that'd be coming from like the board, but it's telling those administrative functions that it's important for them to focus on security. And here's some training to help them understand and see what is expected of them. So once you get to the point where you're able to actually have that proactive training and get people talking about this and get people seeing what's expected of them, then they're starting to integrate into their job function. And once you get to that point, that is a massive sign of success. And that's gone beyond just the, hey, let's get to know each other. Let's understand what our shared goals are.
I want to go back just to kind of recap for a second too, and make sure that we're tracking this the right way. So, and April, I loved calling it authentic empathy. I like that a lot. And you talked about that, Scott. You said that importance. It's not, hey, let me play this game with people. You're not trying to social engineer them into a conversation with you. So when you reach out the first time, in your experience, because you mentioned you've done some things that worked and some things that didn't work, do you do it more opportunistically? You're already at a meeting with somebody, you can tell they've got some frustration, and you say, hey, you seem a little frustrated, let's get together, I'd like to understand your situation better? Or do you reach out to people that you think are strategically valuable across the organization? Like when you think about integrating security, do you start more opportunistic, still from an authentic place, or do you have a different approach, based on the things that haven't worked? Somebody who's listening to this now and they're trying to get their head wrapped around that initial icebreaker. What do I say? Give us an example of something either that didn't work and what you do different, or something that you found works pretty consistently that somebody can try this week.
Yeah, sure. A few things come top to mind. First, I'll start off with things that don't work. One of the things that has never worked or very rarely works or just doesn't build that positive relationship is reaching out to somebody and saying, hey, you screwed up, go fix it and let me know when you're done, right? I mean, that's just, it's aggressive, it's over the top, but yet that still continues to be one of the main approaches that a lot of people in our profession take when interacting with business partners within their company. Another approach that I've seen that doesn't work is when a security organization doesn't understand where they fit into the business, right? Because as a professional working for a company, it's not about you. It's not about what you want to do. It's not about what your goals and objectives are. It's about how you can support the goals and the objectives of the company. Because the company is going a particular direction. They have a particular level of risk tolerance. And how do you play into that? How do you become part of that? So as you think about that, what that does is it helps you restructure your thought process to the point where you're able to have a conversation with like your CIO and say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. CIO, you are supporting the business. You are driving technology governance within the business. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to help understand what that technology governance looks like. So what are the specific challenges? And it almost turns into an interview. So that initial conversation can be opportunistic. It can also be something where you just reach out and say, hey, I know that there is a major, technology governance push that's happening right now because we have problems with standardization of assets, standardization of software. We can't keep asset inventories. We don't know what software licensing we have out there. Like, these are all common problems that most businesses have. Well, every business is concerned about them. So look for those common things and then go and see what you can do to help solve those problems. Because what are some of the, couple big challenges that we run into as security professionals when we're doing our work, right? We don't have asset inventories. We don't have application inventories. We don't know where things are. We don't know where data lives. So those are also challenges, but from a different vantage point. So if you can go and have a conversation with an IT leader of any different sort and have a discussion about those same challenges that you struggle with and understand why they struggle with them, you can start to build that relationship. So that, that's kind of one example of a common challenge that both technology folks and security folks both have.
One of the things I've noticed, sometimes people come in, they're new to the position, they're excited. They start looking at models of frameworks. Pick your favorite. I don't want to pick one. But then what I've noticed is they start suddenly feeling like security, even though we're here to elevate other people, and even though they're desperate and they're interested to get those relationships, suddenly, because of what security is now looking for, they're increasing the workload on other teams. So if we're talking about integrating with other teams and helping people, even if we get past the, I'm from security, do this, do it now, screw you, walk away, and we're much more, hey, I'm here to help out, we're still representing more work and a change to them. What's your experience been around that, and how do we start to alleviate that for people? Because I don't think we make it go away, but maybe we do. What are your thoughts on how to navigate that better?
There's a couple things that you said there. One is, the scenario is you're a new leader to an organization. What should you be thinking about? That's kind of one challenge. And I'll start with that one. So as a new leader to an organization, one of the first things that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to develop what your 90-day plan is. And part of that 90-day plan should be either a self-assessment or some type of assessment from a third party coming in and evaluating what you're doing, how effective your governance structure is, how that translates into operations, and give you some level of effectiveness assurance of what's working, what's not working. It almost equates to a gap analysis. But what I think you're going after is really more along the lines of how do you start to approach the conversations to get other organizations to take on more work. And the way I look at it is it's not about them taking on more work. It's about them prioritizing the work that makes the most sense. So for example, one of the ruts that a lot of security professionals get into is they have this, I'll call it a zero tolerance perspective, right? So you have to remediate as many vulnerabilities as possible. You have to reduce risk as much as possible. And you really have to take this kind of over the top aggressive approach. And that's not actually doing anybody any favors. That is actually leading to a lot of the challenge that other technology groups, as well as other business partners within a company have with a security organization. Security organizations should be all about identifying and helping manage risk. However, the security organization in almost every circumstance is not the risk owner. So they're the ones that are helping identify the risk, they're helping roll the risk categories up, and they're helping find risk both at a very technical level as well as a very high strategic level. And they're presenting this risk case to the business leaders, to their IT leaders, and to people all throughout their company about what challenges the organization is having. And then they're working with, or they should be working with, those same business leaders, having a conversation about what is tolerable and what is not, and why, and maybe why they think something that's tolerable actually isn't, because here's what can happen. Here's the impact. Here's the damage. And also here's the likelihood that's part of it. So when it comes to assessing a framework and leveraging that as a backstop for your security program, whether it's CIS 20 or ISO or whatever you've got out there, you're able to actually take those same control categories and you're able to kind of rank yourself as it relates to risk you see to the business, as far as it goes from the best practices governance structure that the standard calls out to what you're actually doing in practice. And you can evaluate that yourself. You can bring somebody in to do it, like I said. But the point is that you're doing it, and then you're identifying those risks through the process of identifying gaps, and you're escalating those conversations based on potential damage to the organization. That tends to be a really productive discussion. And what you'll find, or what I've found, is there's often a lot of disagreement, right? So that my perspective, coming from the security perspective, glass is half empty, world is going to break in and all of our customer data and everything we care about is going to be gone. The business isn't thinking about it from that way. So you're able to kind of bring those two perspectives together and have a really fruitful conversation.
Scott, that was a really good point you made about the business case, and having to do that, you really need to have some sort of gap analysis or something like that. But people don't like change, so especially sudden change. So how do you ease people into change, or do you just make sudden changes, or how do you handle the people that are going to literally fight you about change?
Well, I've always found it's best to plant seeds and let those seeds grow and get the people that you need to see changes from, or you'd like to solicit changes with, water those seeds. And when I say that, what I really mean is, because that metaphor is kind of cheesy, but what I really mean is that you're basically planting an idea. You're talking to them about something that they're doing that might potentially impact the company that you both work for, as well as all of the other people around you. And going in with a kind of gentle approach at this, and sometimes it's just a matter of planting an idea as a seed, and then showing over time, maybe it's weeks, maybe it's months in some cases, how that seed grows and how those thoughts materialize in that other person's mind. Because oftentimes what I've seen, and by no means am I a psychologist or qualified to even offer an opinion on this, but from what I've seen based on my own experiences, is that people are oftentimes resistant to change because they don't understand it. And in order to understand things, some people are very dynamic and they can understand things very quickly on the fly, but other people need a little bit of time to adapt. So as a professional, and this goes beyond and transcends just the security profession, but as a professional, you kind of have to do some quick deduction of, is this person I'm interfacing with fast? Are they with it? Can they adapt to change? Can they move fast? And can they go forward in this conversation? Or do you need to give them a couple tidbits of information, a couple tidbits of knowledge, not be overwhelming, not be over the top, and then just kind of step back and let that knowledge grow in their minds, and then come back to it in a week and have another conversation. Say, hey, what do you think about this? We talked about this subject. We talked about this practice. We talked about this risk, whatever it is. What do you think about it now? You've had a little bit of time to let it soak.
I like that. Have you also found, Scott, that sometimes, because you talked about knowing security's place, I think that's important, and I just wanted to call that forward again. If security knows its place, I call it the context. and it has the support of the executive team, and you come along and you're showing people these things, because April's right. People don't like change. They've got their stuff dialed in. They might be overwhelmed with it, but it doesn't mean they want to change. Have you ever had a situation then when you get to come in and say, hey, I can make this easier for you? Let me go to bat for you. This is important for you. It's important for security. Let me help you get the budget, the resources, the tool, the project, the what have you. Have you had cases where that worked, where they suddenly saw you as an ally, not just somebody adding to their workload?
100%. 100%. In fact, I've actually even had it work on the flip side, where in a past job, there was an organization that was especially hard to deal with. And, building these bridges was very, very challenging. And, we struggle with it all the time. But what would end up happening is every time that other business unit identified a shared goal, they would come to the security team and say, hey, there's a security implication of us not doing this, in addition to us needing to do this for reliability perspectives or whatever their motivations were. So let's partner and let's move the ball forward. So where you can identify those opportunities, where you have those integrated functions, whether it comes down to things like health and performance monitoring, infrastructure maintenance, you're driving a common architecture, you're talking about shared key performance indicators, or you're identifying common key risk indicators, whatever it might be. Having those opportunities to align on things, whether it's advantageous for you directly or you're helping them either at their request or at your request, I think that definitely builds that bond and that builds that progressive work forward. The trick, though, is in a lot of those situations, how do you keep that relationship and that momentum after that one particular situation is resolved or moving in the right direction? That's the trick, right? How do you continue managing that people relationship, and how do you keep managing and interfacing with the folks that might be challenging on a day-to-day basis? And that just comes down to patience, right? It's almost like dealing with kids or dealing with difficult people. As professionals, we have to really kind of mute our inner voices a lot of times and talk to folks like we would anybody else, right, on the street, just very friendly, very nice. We got to take ourselves out of it. We can't let the frustrations of them not seeing what we're saying get to us. And, we really have to kind of mute ourselves. And sometimes our inner voice is our worst enemy in that regard.
I think it's a great point. And we're coming up on a break. So we'll pick up right there, because there's a lot there. And I definitely want to take you up on the offer to talk about, so you've had a good first step. How do you keep building that relationship? And so we're going to dig deeper into that in a second. And I know there's a couple other directions we can go. As we take our quick break, it's a good chance to go check out securityweekly.com. Check out our shows. There's a ton of stuff, all designed to help you get better at what you do, including our on-demand content. And when we come back, we're going to stay with Scott. We're going to talk about other ways to be more effective at your job based on his hard-fought, hard-won experience. Back in a minute.